Hey good people, Batavia here. Every year we're looking for ways to get more out of my space. This year in particular, I've been focused on ways to grow more vertically. So this is my VegoGarden bed. It's one of the tall models that sits 32 inches tall. In this configuration, it's 2 feet by 8 feet. Now, this is in its 4th growing season, so we've grown any number of herbs and vegetables in the space prior, and it's done wonderfully. But I felt like I could get a bit more out of the space, so we've given it an upgrade. I've added the metal frame string trellis that Vego offers to the existing bed. If you've been growing 1 year, 5, 10, or 20, sometimes you take a step back and realize it's not about adding more garden beds or more containers. Sometimes it's about using the space you have a bit more intentionally. Now, this is a great way to get more out of your space and not change the footprint at all. One of the things that I've realized is sometimes we get something set up and we feel like we're stuck with it, and there isn't really an opportunity to change things once it's in place, and that's absolutely not the case. I want to cover off on the install, but I also want to cover off on what and why I'm growing these things in this space. So the nice thing about this trellis is that everything comes in one box. You've got the frame, the string, the hardware, everything you needed to get started. Putting the frame together, it's actually pretty straightforward. Once I had all of the pieces laid out, it went together much like building a simple rectangle frame. Instructions recommended having a second person help lift the finished trellis onto the garden bed. Now, I managed to do it myself, but if you have someone around to lend a hand, I absolutely recommend taking advantage of it. One tip I definitely pass along is to follow Vego's recommendation and install the string while the trellis is still laying flat. I started adding my string, but I wasn't sure about the pattern I wanted to use, so I waited until the trellis was actually on the bed to finish it. It worked out, but it was definitely a little bit more difficult than it was when I was setting up the string while it was laying flat. Since this was an existing bed, I simply removed the 2 sets of bolts on either side of the bed and attached the trellis to it using the new hardware that was included. The good note about the metal trellis is you don't need the tall bed to take advantage of it. It can be assembled in various heights. So if this is not your garden setup, no worries. There's some other sizes within the VegoGarden line that you can actually use the metal trellis for as well. Once everything was secured, I topped the bed off with soil, added a little compost and granular fertilizer, and then I got some of my favorites planted. What do you grow vertically? Are you using trellises? What's your favorite, whether it's a vegetable or even a flower? Drop it in the comment below. So one of the things I love about gardening is there's always an opportunity to improve, whether it's within the growing year or from one growing season to the next. You always have a chance to tweak things and make them better than they were before. You know, whenever I think about making a change in the garden, which I do often, I think about what problem am I trying to solve. Now in this case, there wasn't a problem. This bed was productive. Year after year, it had been producing herbs and veggies. It was super easy to get in and out of, whether it was planting, maintaining, or harvesting. But I still felt like it could work a little harder for me. So a small step like adding this trellis allows me not only to grow across the bed space, but also up, which otherwise would be unused space. And when I think about my garden area, there are a handful of crops that I want to grow every year and I have to find space for them because they can get wild and rambunctious, and I really need to grow them up versus out. And in this case, I've added one more growing space that I can do that in. I have 3 favorites that I've planted out that each are going to do something a little bit different when it comes to this garden bed. So first up are sweet potatoes. Now I've grown sweet potatoes over the years in containers. I've grown them in raised beds, and what I see is most typical is they'll grow and crawl all over that growing space. And typically whatever you're growing in that space is just going to be sweet potatoes because they take over. They're a little bit of a bully. But what I wanted to do in this space is plant the sweet potatoes in the front part of the bed, and that allows me to either let them climb up the trellis or, based on the size of this bed in particular, let them climb out of the bed. Now, I also have 2 other plantings. One is going to be the star of the trellis, I believe. Cucumbers. I know, I can never get enough of them. So I planted my cucumbers on either side, and primarily because they are going to be kind of the first to tap out in the garden season. I'll get a healthy harvest for them all summer, going into the later part of summer, but this on either side for the planting gives me a chance to pull these plants and the vines when I'm ready. Now in the center, I put my pole beans. In all of these cases, I want to be able to walk up to the bed, harvest, and both for cucumbers and pole beans, the more you harvest, the better off you are. The more ideal size you harvest, the more likely you are to enjoy them. So having them in the center, knowing that they're going to grow all summer and into the fall, allows me to minimally leave them in place, even if I have to remove my cucumbers later in the growing season. As a reminder for myself, had I installed this trellis earlier in the growing season, I would have absolutely planted out green peas. Your sweet peas, they would have done a beautiful job in the early spring climbing up this trellis. It would have been a great start to the growing season. So I'm going to add that to my list for next year. So one of the things I love about gardening is it's always a work in progress, a true work in progress. This space 3 weeks ago was just soil. Now we have life. The cucumbers are climbing up. The pole beans have actually emerged because they were just direct sowed when we set up the trellis. They're starting to climb as well, and the sweet potatoes have filled out the space. We'll eventually be able to see a wall of green and then vegetables just waiting for us to come in and pick them. I encourage you to continue to look at your space and think about ways to improve it, and keeping in mind that it doesn't always need to be a big change. Sometimes it's just the small things that really matter. Okie doke, so I'd love to hear from y'all. What are some of your favorites to grow vertically on a trellis? You've seen some of mine, and I'm really excited about how they'll perform this year, but I'd love to hear from you all in the comments. If you have any questions about this setup, feel free to drop them in the comments. I'll also leave my VegoGarden link and discount code if you're interested in this metal frame trellis, or if you're interested in any of the other Vego products. I appreciate y'all spending some time with me. As always, feel free to drop any questions or comments below, and I look forward to seeing y'all on the next one.